Hello. Write in the comments where you're from. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. Enjoy listening. When Diana fell down the stairs at her husband's birthday party, he first refused to help her up, and then, following his mother's advice, refused to take her to the hospital. His mother told him, "She just wants to ruin the party, let her deal with it." She passed out from the pain, but when she came to, she pretended to be asleep. What she overheard between them made her blood run cold. And yet, just a few hours earlier, the day had felt almost perfect. Marcus was turning 40. A serious, milestone date. And Vivian, his mother, had insisted the celebration be lavish, worthy of the Thornfield name. Not in a restaurant, no. Only in the ancestral home, their large two-story house, the pride of the family and the quiet envy of half the town. Diana didn't argue. In recent years, she had tried not to argue with her mother-in-law at all. It only made things worse. She did what she knew best. She baked a cake. Not one, but 3. The centerpiece, a 3-tier masterpiece, was her pride. Chocolate sponge soaked in brandy, cherry confit, mascarpone cream. It stood on a separate table, like the king of the evening. The other 2 were smaller, for those who didn't care for chocolate. Diana poured all her tenderness, all her effort into those cakes. They were her gift to her husband, her silent declaration of love, something you could literally taste. She spent the whole day on her feet. First in her bakery, finishing the last touches. Then here, in her mother-in-law's huge house, helping with the table setting, arranging appetizers, making sure everything looked flawless. Vivian followed her like a shadow, sharp eyes catching every detail. Tight lips, a short nod, that was the highest form of approval she was capable of giving. By 7 in the evening the guests began to arrive. The creme de la creme of their small provincial town. The mayor and his wife, the chief doctor of the district hospital, factory owners, a couple of nosy journalists from the local paper. Familiar faces, polished smiles, perfected by years of practice. The air smelled of expensive perfume, money, and a hint of hypocrisy. Marcus, her husband, stood in the center of the living room, receiving congratulations. In his expensive suit he looked solid, even imposing. Today he was the birthday boy, the man of the hour. He smiled, shook hands, said thank you. But Diana saw what others didn't. She noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes kept searching for his mother's. As if waiting for her approval, her cue. He was 40, yet still a boy afraid of making a mistake under his strict mother's gaze. She went up to him, meaning to hug him, to straighten his tie. But he only brushed her hand briefly, his eyes sliding past. "Diana, look, the guests' glasses are empty," he said quietly, irritation flickering in his voice. It wasn't exactly an order, but it wasn't a request she could refuse either. She nodded and moved toward the tables, signaling the waiters. She felt less like the hostess of the evening and more like part of the staff. Staff whose job was to keep the grand machine called Marcus Thornfield's 40th birthday running perfectly. Vivian stood by the fireplace, straight as a rod in a strict burgundy dress. She was the center of this universe. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't fuss. But one movement, one glance from her made everyone move faster. She held a champagne glass in her hand, though Diana hadn't seen her take a single sip. The glass was just part of her image, like her flawless hairdo and the string of large pearls around her neck. Diana poured herself a glass of water. Lately, champagne made her feel queasy. She took a sip, then another. The room was stifling from the crowd, the smell of food and perfume. Her head spun slightly, probably from exhaustion. She hadn't slept in nearly 2 days, perfecting her gift. She leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. The music was too loud, voices merging into one constant hum. She longed to go upstairs, to her and Marcus's bedroom, just to sit in silence for 5 minutes. Just to breathe. She pushed off the wall and headed for the staircase. The staircase was Vivian's pride, broad, dark oak with carved railings, each step polished to a mirror shine. Diana placed her foot on the first step. And then the world tilted. It wasn't just dizziness. It was a sudden, blinding wave of nausea that swallowed her whole. The floor disappeared, the hum of voices turned into a roar, and the chandelier lights blurred into one painful, blinding spot. She reached for the railing, but her fingers slipped on the smooth, lacquered wood. Her other leg buckled. The world flipped. There was a brief, panicked moment of falling, of losing control over her own body. Then impact. First a dull, brutal hit to her side. Then another, sharper one to her shoulder. Her head whipped and smashed against a step. A ringing in her ears. The last thing she saw were the shocked faces of the guests below, frozen in a silent scream. Then darkness swallowed everything. Consciousness crept back slowly, painfully. First came sound, a distant muffled hum like music and voices. Then pain. It was everywhere. It throbbed in the back of her head, stabbed in her shoulder, and her ankle screamed with sharp pain at the slightest attempt to move. Diana tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt like lead. She was lying on something soft. A couch, maybe. The room was quiet, the sounds of the party muffled by a closed door. What happened? The fall. The stairs. She remembered. She had fallen in front of everyone. The shame. The humiliation. She heard the door creak open in the hallway. Then footsteps, hurried, hushed voices. Marcus's voice. And Vivian's. They were right outside the room where she lay. Quiet. Vivian hissed sharply. Why are you panicking like a little boy? Mama, you saw her fall. She's hurt. She's in pain. Vivian let out a cold laugh. And I'm not? She nearly ruined my whole evening. My only son's 40th birthday. She put on a show in front of the entire town. Diana froze. She didn't move, barely breathed. Something in Vivian's tone made her listen harder. It wasn't just anger. It was something else. Cold. Calculated. But she's my wife, Marcus stammered. A wife? A baker who always smells of vanilla and yeast, who can't string two words together in proper society. Marcus, wake up. She's your mistake. A weight around your neck. And tonight she's given us the perfect excuse to cut that weight loose. Diana's blood turned to ice. What was she saying? What did they mean? I don't understand, Marcus said helplessly. Yes, you do, Vivian snapped. Her voice dropped lower, even harder. All her dizziness, her fainting. It's just for attention. Playing the victim. Who will believe her now? Dozens of witnesses saw her swaying all night. We'll say she drank too much. Who would doubt it? Everyone knows her nerves are unstable. I've made sure of that in recent months, had the right conversations with the right people. Diana clutched the couch fabric with her fingers. The physical pain faded into the background, replaced by something far worse. The pain of betrayal. But what do we do now? Marcus asked. His voice sounded like he was about to cry. She'll lie there. Let her. She'll come around. No doctors, do you hear me? Vivian's tone was like steel. The last thing we need is doctors here. Questions, examinations, that's the last thing we want. She'll rest. Tomorrow we'll talk to her. Silence followed. Diana heard only her own heartbeat hammering in her throat. She wanted to scream, to get up, to throw open the door and look them in the eye. Her husband and his mother. But her body wouldn't move. And part of her, cold and clear, whispered, "Stay quiet. Listen." And she did. Mama, Garrison was at the party. He saw it all, Marcus said desperately. He told me my time is running out. That he won't wait any longer. I know, Vivian answered calmly. I spoke to him. And to Charlotte too. She understands everything. She's ready. Charlotte, Nathaniel Garrison's daughter. A cold, calculating beauty with predator's eyes. Diana had seen her at the party tonight. She stayed close to Marcus, whispering something in his ear, and he listened, head bowed obediently. Ready? Ready for what? Marcus asked, confused. Vivian let out an impatient sigh, as if explaining something obvious to a foolish child. Marcus, this fall, it's not a problem. It's a solution. A gift from fate, if you will. It makes everything easier. It gives us a reason. A reason? A reason to get her out of the way. Once and for all. You're drowning in debt. Garrison will destroy us, crush us, if you don't pay him back. And you don't have the money. We don't have it. But Garrison has a daughter. And he's willing to erase your entire debt if you marry her. The whole debt. Can you imagine? This is our only chance to save the business, the house, the family name. Diana's world shattered completely. It broke into thousands of sharp pieces. She lay in the dark room, broken, humiliated, while just outside her husband and his mother were deciding her fate. No, not deciding. They had already decided. She was nothing but an obstacle. A problem to be removed. But Diana, Marcus whispered. It was his last, weak attempt at resistance. What Diana? Vivian cut him off mercilessly. A drunk, hysterical woman who falls downstairs at family parties is very easy to divorce. No one will listen to her. She'll vanish from our lives. For the greater good, Marcus. For our future. Everything depends on her being gone. Do you understand? Gone. Diana squeezed her eyes shut, holding back the groan rising in her throat. This wasn't just a conversation. This was a sentence. And it was being handed down by the people closest to her. In that moment, lying on the couch in a strange room, she realized her old life was over. She had died back there, on the polished oak stairs. Now she would have to fight for a new one. And she would fight alone. The footsteps in the hallway faded. The living room door clicked shut, cutting her off from the sounds of the party. She was left alone in silence, with the pounding pain in her body and those icy words echoing in her head. Gone. She had to be gone. It wasn't just a cruel wish. It was a plan. A cold, calculated plan, where her fall wasn't a tragedy but a convenient twist of fate. A gift, as Vivian had called it. For a moment, anger, hot, furious, pushed the pain aside. She wanted to leap up, storm into that glittering room, and shout in their faces everything she had heard. To look Marcus, her husband, in the eye, the man who had just calmly discussed how best to get rid of her. But she couldn't. Her body was lead, her ankle burned, her head pounded. She understood, staying here meant surrendering to their plan. They would let her rest, and in the morning, they would begin their work. Vivian, with her iron will. Marcus, weak and pliable, soft as wax in his mother's hands. They would tell her she was drunk. That she behaved shamefully. They would make her doubt her own sanity, and then, once she was broken, throw her out of their lives. No. Not happening. Gathering the last scraps of strength, Diana forced herself to move. A groan slipped out as she tried to sit. Sharp pain pierced her ankle, making her hiss and collapse back into the couch cushions. She gingerly touched her leg. Her ankle was swollen, hot to the touch. She couldn't just get up and walk away. She needed help. But who? The guests, most of them were Vivian's friends. They would take her side without question. They would see exactly what they were told to see, a drunk, unstable wife who ruined the party. But there were others. Family friends. People who had known her father and Marcus's father. People Vivian couldn't silence so easily. A desperate, reckless plan took shape in her mind. She had to get out of this room, reach the front hall, and wait until the right guest was leaving. She tried to sit again, this time leaning on her good arm. The world tilted, her vision darkened. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting out the wave of dizziness. The same dizziness that had hit her on the stairs. Now she understood, it wasn't just exhaustion. It was something else. Something she had been given. Maybe in that glass of water she drank before the fall. The thought was so wild it felt like madness. But after what she'd just overheard, nothing seemed impossible. She slid off the couch onto the floor. Every movement burned with pain. She got on her hands and knees, like a wounded animal. Crawl. That was the only way. Across the cold parquet, past the table legs, toward the door. It was humiliating. She, Diana Thornfield, the birthday man's wife, crawling across the floor of what she thought was her home, hiding from her husband and mother-in-law. Reaching the door, she pressed her ear to it. Silence. They had gone back to the living room. They must have thought she was helpless and wouldn't move. Carefully, inch by inch, she turned the handle. The door wasn't locked. They were too sure of her weakness. She opened a crack. From the living room came music and laughter again. The party was in full swing. Her fall had been just a brief disruption, an unpleasant incident already forgotten. She, lying next door with a broken body, wasn't worth interrupting the fun. She slipped into the hallway and crawled along the wall, staying in the shadows. Her goal, the archway leading to the front hall. From there, she'd be able to see the front door. The pain was unbearable. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mixing with the dust on the floor. But she kept going. Every inch was a small victory. A victory over them. Finally, she hid behind a massive chest near the entryway. From there, she could see the coat rack in the front door. Now she just had to wait. Time dragged endlessly. She heard toasts, applause. Heard Marcus's voice thanking the guests. Not a trace of worry in his tone. He played his role perfectly. The role of the happy birthday man. At last, the first couple began saying their goodbyes. Distant relatives of Vivian. Not them. Then the mayor and his wife left. Not them either, he was too close to Vivian. Diana was about to lose hope when she saw him. Edmund. An old friend of her late father-in-law. Honest, straightforward, a man of the old school. Vivian had always feared and disliked him for his bluntness. He was pulling on his heavy coat, slowly wrapping his scarf. This was her chance. Her only chance. Marcus and Vivian were at the door, seeing him off. "Thank you for coming, Edmund," Vivian cooed sweetly. "Marcus is so grateful for your attention." Yes, thank you," Marcus echoed. Edmund reached for the door handle. Now or never. Summoning her last strength, Diana called out. Her voice came out hoarse, weak, more like a groan. "Edmund." All three froze and turned. Their eyes fixed on the dark corner where she hid. For a moment, silence reigned. Marcus reacted first. He rushed to her, panic twisting his face. "Diana, what are you doing here? You need to be lying down." He tried to block her from the guest. "We'll put her back to bed," Vivian jumped in, her face frozen in a cold mask of concern. "She's clearly not herself after drinking too much. Overtired, that's all." But Edmund was not a man to be fooled. He stepped around Marcus and moved toward Diana. He looked at her, huddled on the floor, her ankle swollen and twisted unnaturally, her face and dress smeared with dust. Horror and pity flashed across his face. "My God, girl, what happened to you?" He dropped to one knee beside her. "It hurts," Diana whispered, clinging to his hand like a lifeline. "They don't want to call a doctor." Edmund's eyes darted from Diana to Vivian and Marcus. Anger flared in his gaze. "What's going on here?" His voice was low but carried weight. "This woman is lying on the floor, she needs help, and you keep throwing a party?" "It's a misunderstanding," Vivian began, but he cut her off. "I can see what it is." He stood, pulling a phone from his pocket. "I'm calling an ambulance. Right now." And I strongly suggest you don't try to stop me. Vivian's face froze into a stone mask. Marcus went pale and lowered his eyes. They had lost. One decent man had destroyed their plan. At the hospital, everything spun like a kaleidoscope. White coats, a stretcher, the harsh light of operating lamps, an injection that finally dulled the stabbing pain in her ankle, replacing it with a heavy, throbbing ache. X-rays. The diagnosis, an ankle fracture with displacement. And a concussion. They moved her to a private room in the trauma ward. Marcus arrived after the ambulance, trying to say something, to explain himself. But Diana didn't listen. She turned her face to the wall and stayed silent. Soon he left, leaving her alone. As soon as the orderly stepped out, Diana asked the nurse for a phone. She needed to make one call. To the only person she could trust now. Madison, she said into the receiver when she heard the familiar voice. It's Diana. I need your help. Dr. Madison Fleming was her best friend. They'd known each other since school. Madison, a little older, had always been the serious, level-headed one. She had become the older sister Diana never had. Now she worked as a physician at the city clinic, respected as a first-class diagnostician. 40 minutes later, Madison was in the room. Without a word, she sat on the edge of the bed and took Diana's hand. Her touch was warm, steady. Tell me everything. From the start. And Diana told her. All of it. The birthday, the sudden wave of sickness on the stairs, the fall. Then, stumbling over her tears, she repeated the conversation she had overheard. Word for word. About being a burden. About Garrison's debt. About Charlotte. About Vivian's icy words that she had to disappear. Madison listened in silence, her face growing darker with every minute. She didn't interrupt, didn't gasp. When Diana finished, Madison stayed quiet for a while, processing it all. All right, she finally said in her calm, clinical tone. Dizziness and nausea. You said it started suddenly, right before the fall? Yes. I drank a glass of water and everything spun, Diana whispered. Did you eat or drink anything unusual before that? Something that could have caused it? No, nothing. I was on my feet all day, barely ate at all. Madison stood. Her expression was that of an investigator who had found a lead. I'll be right back. I need to draw blood for a full workup. Not just the standard set. A full toxicology screen. You think? I don't think anything. I want facts, Madison cut in. The ER doctors only did what's standard for trauma. I want to dig deeper. Every possibility needs to be checked. She left, and Diana lay in the ringing silence of the hospital room. All she could do was wait. Wait for confirmation of her darkest suspicion. An hour passed, maybe more. Diana stared at the ceiling, feeling hollow. Burned out. Everything she believed in, her marriage, her family, was a lie. A rotten set piece. The door opened and Madison walked in, moving slowly, a folder of results in her hands. She sat down beside the bed. Her face was grave. Shadowed. Well, she began quietly. Your suspicions weren't unfounded. This wasn't just fainting from exhaustion. Diana held her breath. There were traces in your blood of a very specific plant compound, Madison explained carefully. It's sometimes used in folk medicine, but only in microscopic doses. An extract from a herb that, in higher amounts, causes exactly what you described: sudden dizziness, loss of balance, nausea, blurred vision. The effect is quick but short-lived. And the traces vanish from the blood very fast. We were lucky I got the sample in time. A couple more hours and there would have been nothing to find. So it was true. She hadn't imagined it. She hadn't just been abandoned. Her fall had been engineered. Did they want to injure her? Scare her? It was them, Diana whispered. We don't have direct proof of who did it, Madison said carefully. But the fact remains, something was put into your system. That's what caused the fall. This wasn't accidental poisoning. It was deliberate. Diana covered her face with her hands. It was too much. Too cruel. But that's not all. Madison's voice dropped lower. She paused, then took Diana's hand. Diana, look at me. Diana lowered her hands. In Madison's eyes she saw not only anger and compassion. There was something else. Something that frightened her. During the tests, the standard panel we run for women your age, the results showed something else. Madison took a deep breath. Diana, you're pregnant. It's very early. Just 4 or 5 weeks. The world around Diana vanished. The hospital noises, the smell of disinfectant, the pain in her leg, all of it disappeared. She heard only Madison's words, exploding in her head. Pregnant. She was pregnant. Her eyes drifted down to her stomach. To the place where a new life was quietly forming. A child. Her and Marcus's child. A child she hadn't even known about. A child whose father had agreed just hours ago to be rid of her. In an instant, the horror of it all sharpened into something even darker. They hadn't only tried to harm her. They had put her unborn child in danger. She lifted her eyes to Madison's. There were no tears left. Only cold, ringing emptiness that hardened into steel resolve. They understood each other without words. No one, Diana whispered. No one can know about this. No one, Madison repeated firmly. Especially not them. Right now this is your greatest secret. And your greatest vulnerability. You're not fighting alone anymore. You're fighting for two. The silence in the hospital room grew heavy, almost tangible. Madison's words, "You're pregnant," didn't just hang in the air, they changed everything. They turned the bitterness of betrayal into a raw, primal instinct to protect. This was no longer about a broken heart or a ruined marriage. This was about life. A small, defenseless life that depended on her completely. Madison stayed with her late into the night. They spoke little, there was no need. Madison's calm, steady presence worked better than any sedative. She brought Diana broth in a thermos, made her eat at least a few spoonfuls. She adjusted the pillows under Diana's casted leg, making her more comfortable. She wasn't just a friend, she was a soldier, silently taking her place beside Diana in the same trench. Before leaving, Madison placed a folder of test results on the bedside table. Not the originals, of course, but certified copies. "This is your weapon," she said softly. "Not the only one, but the first. Keep it safe. And remember, you're not alone. Call me anytime, day or night." When Madison left, Diana was alone with her thoughts. The fear hadn't gone anywhere, it sat like a cold knot deep in her stomach. But rising above it now was something new. A cold, calculating fury. She was no longer the victim lying on the couch, overhearing her own sentence. She was a fighter. She knew they would come. Vivian and Marcus. They had to. They needed to finish what they'd started, to make sure she was broken and ready to accept their terms. And Diana decided she would be ready for them. She spent the sleepless night rehearsing the conversation in her mind. Every word, every gesture. She wouldn't let them catch her off guard again. She would speak to them not as a betrayed wife, but as their accuser. In the morning, hospital life went on as usual. The doctor's rounds, injections, breakfast, a bland bowl of oatmeal that Diana forced herself to eat. For the baby. That thought changed everything now. Every step, every decision was no longer just about revenge, but about survival and protection. They came closer to noon. Together. Just as she expected. Vivian entered first, carrying her aura of icy superiority. She wore a perfectly tailored cream suit, her face masked with feigned concern that fooled no one. Marcus trailed behind, eyes downcast, holding a pathetic bouquet of hospital asters. "Diana, dear, how are you?" Vivian trilled, stopping at the foot of the bed. "We worried all night. Such a terrible accident." Marcus stepped closer, offering her the flowers. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, still not looking at her. "I should have called the ambulance right away. I panicked." Diana watched them in silence. She let them speak, recite their rehearsed lines. She saw right through them, the false concern in Vivian's tone, the cowardice in her husband's slumped shoulders. Slowly, with effort, she pushed herself upright against the pillows. She didn't take the flowers. The bouquet hung awkwardly in Marcus's hand. "Worried?" Her voice was even and cold, free of hysteria or tears. It startled them. They had expected something else. Accusations. Sobs. "Were you worried that I didn't die there, on the stairs? Or that your plan fell apart?" Marcus flinched, stepping back as if struck. Vivian only arched an eyebrow. "Diana, what are you saying? You're clearly in shock after the fall. The doctors warned us strange thoughts might occur." "My thoughts aren't strange, Vivian. They're crystal clear. The clarity I found while lying in that room, listening to your conversation through the door." Marcus's face turned deathly pale. He looked at his mother with open terror. Vivian didn't flinch. Her face remained a mask. "It seems you're also having auditory hallucinations," she said calmly. "Sweetheart, I think we should speak to the doctor about a psychiatric evaluation." "There's no need to speak to the doctor," Diana cut her off. She reached for the folder Madison had left on the bedside table. "Better talk to me. About where, for example, this interesting little herb in my blood came from. The one that causes dizziness and loss of coordination. My friend, Dr. Fleming, was quite surprised when she found it. She said it's very rare, and that someone would have to be very knowledgeable to know about it. And very cruel to use it." She opened the folder and handed them the toxicology report. Marcus didn't even look at it. His lips trembled as he stared at his mother, cornered. Vivian took the sheet. Her eyes flicked over it, and the faintest smirk touched her lips. She showed neither fear nor surprise. Only mild irritation. As if Diana had broken the rules of some complicated game. "Dr. Fleming," she drawled, handing the paper back. "Your old school friend. Of course she'd write whatever you asked. Very convenient." It was a hard blow. A hit to the gut. They had already prepared their defense, already found a way to discredit her only piece of evidence. "It was you," Diana said, locking eyes with Marcus. "You put it in my water. You, or your mother." Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but Vivian stepped in first. She moved forward, her voice sharp as steel. "Enough of this circus, Diana. We didn't come here to listen to your wild accusations. We came to help. Your condition is clearly unstable. You were acting strangely even before this. All our friends and acquaintances noticed it. There it was." She remembered the words from that overheard conversation. "I've been taking care of it for months, having the right talks with the right people." So Vivian had been laying the groundwork all along. Painting her as unstable, maybe even insane. "I told people you were depressed, that you were drinking, that you weren't yourself," Vivian went on, her voice merciless. "I did it to protect you, to excuse your behavior in their eyes. And now you twist my care against us." Diana laughed. A dry, sharp sound, with no trace of humor. "Care? You call that care? You've been preparing public opinion so that, when the time came, you could declare me insane and get rid of me. So she nodded toward Marcus, could marry Garrison's daughter and save your sinking empire." Marcus recoiled as if slapped. He hadn't expected her to know everything. Vivian, however, stayed unshaken. She looked carved from stone. She stepped closer to the bed and placed several folded documents on the blanket. "Since you already know, that makes things simpler," she said evenly. "No more need for pretense. Yes, the family's situation is catastrophic. Yes, Marcus marrying Charlotte Garrison is the only solution. This isn't personal, Diana. It's business. She gestured at the papers with her chin. Here. A power of attorney. While you're recovering, you transfer all rights to Marcus, your joint accounts, assets, everything. Just a formality. So he can handle financial matters while you rest. Sign it. It'll be easier for everyone. Diana looked at the papers. A power of attorney. The perfect tool to strip her of everything. Their apartment, the car, their shared savings. They weren't even trying to hide their intentions. They acted boldly, certain of her helplessness. She took the papers in her hands. Marcus looked at her with hope. Maybe he thought she would give in? That she would sign? That she was still the same Diana who always avoided conflict and surrendered? She looked him straight in the eyes. For the first time, he met her gaze. And in her eyes he saw no pain, no fear. Only ice. Slowly, with deliberate pleasure, she tore the papers in half. Then again. And again. Tiny scraps fell onto the white hospital blanket. No, she said quietly, clearly. That's not going to happen. For the first time, something like anger flickered across Vivian's face. She hadn't expected defiance. You'll regret this, she hissed. No, Diana said again, her voice stronger. You will. Did you think I'd cry? Beg? You were wrong. I heard everything. I know everything. And I won't let you destroy my life. I won't let you destroy me. This isn't a request, it's a declaration of war. I'll expose you. I'll tell everyone what you did. I'll prove you tried to poison me. And I'll find a way to take everything from you, down to the last cent. She said it while staring at Marcus. She wanted him to understand, the point of no return had been crossed. Vivian took her son by the arm. Her face became unreadable again. She looked down on Diana with disdain, like at an annoying insect. Well, she said. Try. They turned and walked to the door. Marcus moved like a puppet, completely under his mother's control. He never said a word. At the door, Vivian stopped and looked back. A cruel, triumphant smile curved her lips. Then she delivered her final, crushing blow. And who will believe you, a drunken hysteric, she said slowly, savoring every word. We have a dozen witnesses from the party. Respected people who saw you stumbling, barely able to stand. Who saw you swaying and tripping. We've already built the story against you. The perfect story. To everyone, you're just an unhappy, drunken woman. And everything you say will only prove your madness. The door closed behind them. Diana sat on the bed surrounded by shredded paper. Vivian's words hit harder than the fall down the stairs. She realized they hadn't just prepared for divorce. They were preparing for her complete destruction. They had already taken her husband and her family. Now they were taking her name. Her reputation. Her right to the truth. She was left alone, against them, and against the entire town they had already turned against her. Vivian's words hung in the hospital room like poison. Who will believe you, a drunken hysteric? It wasn't just a threat. It was a fact. They had been preparing for this. Every sympathetic look from acquaintances in recent months, every question about her mood, it had all been part of Vivian's play. And Diana had been the unwitting star of a tragedy staged against her. After they left, she sat motionless for a long time, staring at the scraps of paper on the blanket. The rage boiling inside her gave way to cold, ringing despair. They had thought of everything. They had built her reputation for madness, gathered witnesses, and now were ready to strike the final blow. And what did she have? A lab report, so easily dismissed by Vivian as a forgery from a friendly doctor. And a secret. Her greatest secret, which was also her greatest weakness. The thought of the baby jolted her. Despair was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had to act fast and decisively. Madison came that evening after her shift. Diana told her everything about the visit from Vivian and Marcus. Madison listened, her lips pressed into a thin line. "They're bold because they feel untouchable," she said. "They think you're weak. Right now, their main goal is to isolate you. Cut off your support, cut off your money. You need to get ahead of them." But how? Diana felt a wave of helplessness. "My leg is broken. I'm stuck in this hospital. They can do whatever they want." "You're not stuck," Madison said firmly. "You have a concussion and a fracture. That doesn't require long hospitalization. I'll speak to your doctor. If you sign a release, they can discharge you tomorrow under my responsibility. A cast and crutches don't mean you're trapped. The most important thing is to get out of here and start moving. Every hour counts." Madison's idea was risky, but it was the only way. Diana agreed. By morning, Madison had handled the paperwork. Diana, wobbling on the crutches that felt foreign and awkward, signed all the necessary forms. The doctor shook his head but didn't argue. The fracture was complicated, but not critical, and they couldn't keep a patient against her will. Madison called a taxi. Stepping out of the stuffy hospital into the fresh air, Diana felt dizzy. The world seemed too bright, too loud. But it was the world she had to fight in. "Where to first?" Madison asked, helping her into the back seat. "Home," Diana said. "I need to get my things. My passport, the cash in the box, my laptop. Everything that might be useful." She still called it home. The place where she and Marcus had lived for 10 years. Where every cup, every book on the shelf had been chosen with love. She hadn't yet fully realized that this home was no longer hers. The taxi stopped at their building. Madison helped her out. Climbing to the 3rd floor on crutches was torture. Each step stabbed her leg and her pride. A neighbor, an old woman from the 1st floor, peered out, watching her with a mix of pity and judgment. Clearly, Vivian's whispers had reached even her. At last, they reached the apartment door. Diana pulled out her keys. By habit, she slid one into the lock. It didn't turn. She tried again. And again. The key fit, but wouldn't turn. She stared at the lock. It was different. New. Shiny. Not hers. They had changed the locks. The realization hit like a hammer. So fast. They hadn't wasted a minute. While she was in the hospital, they had already erased her from their lives. Literally. She started pounding on the door with her free hand. "Marcus. Open up. I know you're in there. Open the door." No answer. Just hollow silence. "Maybe he's not home?" Madison suggested. But Diana knew he was. He was sitting just behind the door, listening to her humiliation. His mother had told him to. "Sit and don't open." She sank onto the step, her crutches clattering beside her. Every bit of strength drained away. She sat there at the door of her own apartment, locked out. No belongings. No documents. "Wait," Madison said, leaning down. "There's something under the door." Wedged between the threshold and the doorframe was a folded sheet of paper. Madison picked it up and handed it to Diana. It was a sheet torn from a notepad. Marcus's handwriting. A few short, blunt lines. "Diana, you are no longer welcome here. Don't make a scene. I'll send you things later. Marcus." No sorry. No explanation. Just a verdict. Dry and soulless, like a protocol. "Bastard," Madison breathed. "Spineless mama's boy." Diana crushed the note in her fist. Tears rose in her throat, but she held them back. She couldn't cry. Not now. "Money," she said flatly. "We have a joint account at the bank. And my savings book. I need to go to the bank." Another taxi. This time to the city center, to the main branch. Diana hobbled to the service window, feeling the stares of other customers. A woman in a cast, on crutches, pale and gaunt. Probably an accident, they thought. None of them knew it wasn't an accident at all, but the start of a war. She slid her passport through the glass, thankfully it had been in her purse, and asked the clerk to check the balance of her joint account with her husband. The young teller typed for a long time, then looked at Diana with surprise. Your balance is $0, 0 cents. Zero? Diana couldn't believe it. There should be a significant amount there. Please check again. The girl glanced back at her screen. Yesterday morning, the entire balance was withdrawn in cash. On the basis of a power of attorney in Marcus Thornfield's name. They had taken everything. Down to the last cent. And they had done it immediately, right after leaving the hospital. While she was still reeling from their ultimatum, they were already moving. Diana went cold inside. Fine, she said, forcing her voice not to shake. I also have a personal account. My savings book. Please check it. She handed over her old, worn savings book. These were her funds, an inheritance from her parents, plus what she had saved over the years from her bakery. Her safety net. The clerk scanned it, her brows shooting up. This one too. Balance is $0, she said with even more surprise. The money was transferred yesterday to another account. Transferred? Diana whispered. This is my personal account. My husband didn't have access. The transfer was executed under a notarized power of attorney in your name, the clerk recited from the screen. Granting full authority over all your accounts. A power of attorney. They had one. But how? She had ripped up the papers they brought her. Then it came back to her. A memory from 6 months ago. Marcus had handed her some documents, supposedly from the tax office. Something about their family business, about the bakeries. He'd said it was just a formality, that her signature was needed as co-owner so he could represent their shared interests. She had been busy with a big order, didn't read them, just signed. She had trusted him. Completely. She understood now. That paper hadn't been for the tax office. It had been a general power of attorney. And they had waited. Waited for the right moment to use it. And now, that moment had come. She left the bank in a daze. Madison was waiting outside. One look at Diana's face, and she understood. They left me with nothing, Diana said, staring blankly. Everything. The joint account, my personal savings. All of it. She stood there on the street, in a cast, without a home or a dollar to her name. The destruction was almost complete. No, not everything, Madison said, gripping her hand tightly. You still have the bakery. Your business. That's yours. The bakery. Sweet Dreams Bakery. Her creation. Her pride. The one place where she was in control. The place Marcus and Vivian had always sneered at, calling it that vanilla-smelling shop. Yes. She still had the bakery. I need to go there, Diana said, her voice hardening again. My partner Michael is there. We can take out an emergency loan against the business. I need money to rent a place, to hire a lawyer. To live. They went to the bakery. The smell of fresh bread, cinnamon, and coffee wrapped around her as soon as they stepped inside. That smell had always calmed her, made her feel at home. But today it brought no comfort. Her partner, Michael, a round, kind man with whom she had built this business from scratch, came out from behind the counter. When he saw Diana on crutches, he gasped. But his face showed not just sympathy. There was fear too. Diana, what happened? Marcus told me you were in the hospital. It's a long story, Mike, she cut him off. I need to talk to you. In private. They went into her small office at the back. Diana sank onto a chair, leaning her crutches against the wall. Mike, I need money fast. I want us to take a loan against the bakery equipment. We've needed to upgrade the ovens for a while anyway. And I need the funds. Urgently. Michael avoided her eyes. He shifted from foot to foot, fiddling with the edge of his apron. Diana, there's something you don't know. What is it? She asked sharply. He sighed, gathering courage, then looked at her with open pity. It's too late, Diana. We can't get a loan. Why not? We've got a good credit record, steady income. Because the bakery already has a loan. A massive one. Michael pulled some papers from his desk drawer and laid them before her. Your husband, Marcus, he came 3 days ago. The day before his birthday. He showed her the contract. A loan agreement for an astronomical sum, far beyond what their small bakery could handle. And listed as collateral was everything: ovens, mixers, refrigerators. Even the cash register. But how? Diana whispered, staring at her own signature at the bottom. She didn't remember signing it. He brought a power of attorney, Michael said, his voice guilty. In your name. Notarized. He said it was urgent, something for the family, and that you two would sort it out later. I couldn't refuse him, he's your husband. That power of attorney again. The one she'd signed for the tax office. They had used it not only to drain her accounts. They had used it to destroy the last thing she had left. Her business. Her bakery. They hadn't just stolen her money. They had saddled her with her husband's debts. Diana stared at the signature, at the numbers on the contract. And she knew it was the end. They hadn't just thrown her out on the street. They had pushed her into a debt pit. They had tied her hands and feet, leaving her no chance of escape. This wasn't just destruction. It was an execution. Perfectly planned and coldly carried out. The silence in the small bakery office pressed against her ears. The smell of vanilla and fresh bread, once a symbol of warmth and safety for Diana, now felt mocking. It belonged to a world that had just collapsed. She sat staring at the loan contract, the numbers dancing before her eyes. It wasn't just an amount. It was a noose Marcus and Vivian had carefully placed around her neck. Michael stood opposite, staring guiltily at the floor. He was a good baker but a bad businessman. Simple, trusting. He had believed Marcus, his partner's husband. Who wouldn't? I didn't know, Diana, I swear, he mumbled. He said it was for both of you, that you were expanding. Diana lifted her empty gaze to him. She didn't blame Michael. He was just another victim. A puppet in someone else's game. She stood, leaning on her crutches. Her legs shook, not from pain but from shock. She was homeless, penniless, and now buried in debt. Massive debt. They hadn't just thrown her away. They had sealed her alive inside a financial prison. Madison, waiting out front, saw her face and understood everything. She walked over, silently took her arm, and led her outside. Come with me, she said firmly. You're staying at my place tonight. Madison's apartment was small but cozy, on the edge of the city. She settled Diana on the couch and brought her a glass of water. Diana drank without tasting it. She was in a daze. All the blows of the past day had blurred into one continuous hum in her head. They planned everything, she whispered. Every step. The locks, the accounts, the loan. They left me with nothing. They left you your life, Madison cut in. And your mind. That's enough. But Diana wasn't sure. What could she do? Go to the police? With what? A story about her husband emptying her accounts with a power of attorney she had signed herself. About him saddling her business with a loan, also with that same document. Legally, it was airtight. And her claim that they had tried to poison her would collapse against the wall of witness statements Vivian had already prepared. They would laugh her out of the station. Call her insane. She was trapped. In a perfect, carefully built trap. That night she barely slept. She lay on Madison's couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying the past years in her head. All those little humiliations from Vivian, which she had excused as a difficult mother-in-law's nature. All those moments when Marcus dodged serious talks about money, brushing her off with everything's under control. It hadn't been chance. It had been a system. And she, Diana, had been blind inside it. By dawn, as gray light crept through the window, something clicked inside her. Rage and despair began giving way to cold calculation. If she couldn't beat them head-on, she had to find another way. She needed a weapon. Leverage. Something that would make them afraid. Something that could shatter their perfect facade. But where could she find it? Vivian was too clever to leave traces. Then she remembered one person. Someone Vivian despised and avoided. Someone part of the family, yet always apart. Julian. Marcus's cousin. Julian was Marcus's complete opposite. Quiet, withdrawn, obsessively precise. He worked as an accountant in a Thornfield family bakery chain. Vivian kept him there out of a strange mix of duty and disdain. She saw him as a loser, incapable of more. He didn't fit her world, where everyone had to shine, succeed, and play by her rules. Julian, however, simply did his job. He knew every financial flow, every cent coming and going. And he hated Vivian. He never said it out loud, but Diana could see it. In the way he pressed his lips when she barked orders. In the way he avoided her gaze. He was the only one in the family who neither feared her nor flattered her. He ignored her as much as he could. Julian was her only chance. If anyone knew their dirty secrets, it was him. She found his number in her old notebook. Calling him was risky. Their phones were likely tapped or at least checked. They had to meet in person. "Madison, I need to get into town," she said the next morning as her friend got ready for work. "Can you drop me at Central Park?" Madison didn't ask questions. She just nodded. Diana called Julian from a payphone. She said her name, and silence hung on the line for a few seconds. "Diana?" His voice sounded surprised, cautious. "I heard what happened. I'm so sorry." "Julian, I need to talk to you," she said quickly. "Not on the phone. It's important. It's about Vivian and Marcus." Silence again. She could feel his hesitation. Meeting her now meant going against all-powerful Vivian. It was dangerous. "I can't," he said finally. "You understand that, don't you?" "I do," Diana replied. "I understand you're afraid. But I also know how you feel about her. They're trying to destroy me. And if you don't help, they'll succeed. But if we act together, we can stop her. Think about it. Central Park, by the fountain, in an hour. If you don't come, I'll understand." She hung up before he could answer. She had done all she could. Now there was only waiting. She sat on a bench by the fountain, wrapped in Madison's old jacket. Her leg in a cast throbbed. The crutches leaned beside her. She felt small and vulnerable. An hour passed. Then 10 more minutes. He wasn't coming. She had been wrong. He was too scared. She was about to get up, hobble back to the payphone, and call a taxi when she saw him. He was walking down the path, glancing around nervously. In a plain gray coat, a briefcase in hand. He sat down at the other end of the bench, not looking at her. "Calling me was stupid," he said quietly. "She watches my every move." "I had no choice," Diana replied just as softly. "You're my only chance." He sat in silence, staring at the fountain. "I know what they did to you," he said. "I saw the loan papers for your bakery. It's vile. Even for her. This is just the beginning, Julian. They want to destroy me. Turn me into a crazy drunk and throw me out with nothing. And they've almost succeeded." "I know," he nodded. The family's finances are a disaster. A complete collapse. I thought you just had problems. Bad investments. Julian gave a bitter laugh. Problems? Diana, this isn't problems. It's a black hole swallowing everything. The bakery chain hasn't been profitable in years. It's running at a loss. For years they've been keeping up appearances, burning through reserves and piling on debt. I tried talking to Marcus, showing him the reports. He wouldn't listen. And her? She just ordered me to make the numbers look pretty. But where did such a massive debt come from? Debt to Garrison? How could the business fall that far? Julian turned to her. His eyes held a mix of fear and determination. He had clearly made a decision. It's not about the business, Diana. The business is just a cover. The source of the debt isn't failed investments. The source of the debt is blackmail. Diana froze. Blackmail. That word explained everything. Marcus's desperation, Vivian's willingness to do anything to strike a deal with Garrison. Who's blackmailing Marcus? Nathaniel Garrison, Julian replied. The very same man whose daughter he's now supposed to marry. He's got them on a very tight leash. But with what? What could he possibly know that's worth that kind of fortune? Julian looked away again. He hesitated. Telling this secret meant burning every bridge. But years of humiliation and Vivian's contempt had piled up, and he couldn't hold it in any longer. It's an old story, he began, his voice flat. It's about Marcus's father. Your father-in-law. To everyone, he was a saint. Ian Thornfield. The legend, the founder of the family empire. Honest, noble, flawless. That's the image Vivian created. That's what the city believes. And in reality? Diana whispered. In reality, about 20 years ago, he almost sank the entire empire. He had a mistress. A young lounge singer. He spent insane amounts of money on her. Company money. He siphoned funds, forged accounts. He was embezzling on a massive scale. He nearly bankrupted the firm. Diana listened, breath caught in her throat. It was unbelievable. The whole Thornfield legacy, their reputation as spotless entrepreneurs, it was all a lie. When Vivian found out, she went into a rage. Not because of the affair. Because of the threat to their status and wealth. She knew if this got out, their name would be dragged through the mud forever. And she found a way out. What way? Diana asked faintly. She found a scapegoat. There was a manager in the company. Cooper Bell. Loyal, honest. He worshipped Ian. Trusted him completely. Vivian fabricated the evidence. Forged the documents to make it look like Bell was the one stealing. Ian, crushed with guilt, helped her. They set him up. Bell was fired in disgrace, saddled with all the debt. They threatened him, and he had to leave town to avoid prison. His life was ruined. And Vivian saved the family's reputation. Turned her embezzling husband into a saint. Diana's blood ran cold. It was monstrous. But what does this have to do with Garrison? And blackmail? Julian looked her straight in the eye. Because that manager, Cooper Bell, before he left, wrote a full confession. Sworn testimony with a notary. He laid out everything, who actually stole the money, how Vivian and Ian framed him. He left that document with one man he trusted. And that man was a young, ambitious businessman named Nathaniel Garrison. Garrison kept that paper for years, waiting for his moment. And when Marcus, running the company into the ground, fell into debt, Garrison came to him and pulled out his trump card, the testimony. He told Marcus he would release it, destroy the legend of St. Ian Thornfield, and with it the family's entire reputation. Unless Marcus became his debtor. His servant. Marcus panicked and agreed. Since then, Garrison's been bleeding him dry. And when the money ran out, he demanded something else: marriage to his daughter. This isn't just debt settlement, Diana. It's a merger. A takeover. Garrison is claiming the Thornfield name, their business, everything. And Vivian is willing to go along, as long as it keeps her late husband's secret and the facade intact. Diana sat stunned. Now it all made sense. Vivian's desperate gamble. Marcus's willingness to sacrifice her. It wasn't just greed. It was deadly fear. Fear of exposure. Their family legacy stood not on solid ground but on the rotten bones of a ruined man. And now she knew their darkest, most dangerous secret. This was the weapon she had been searching for. A weapon that could blow their world apart. Julian's story buzzed in Diana's head like a live wire. Shock gave way to a strange, intoxicating sense of power. She was no longer just a victim. Now she held a grenade with the pin pulled. A secret that could shatter the Thornfield reputation Vivian had spent decades building. Julian left as quietly as he had come, leaving Diana alone on the bench. She knew he had risked everything by telling her. That quiet, invisible man had staged his own small rebellion. Now the next move was hers. She returned to Madison's apartment a different person. The daze was gone. In its place was sharp, cold determination. She had a plan. Risky, desperate, but the only one left. She couldn't go to the police or lawyers with this story. Julian's words weren't proof. Belle's testimony was in Garrison's hands, and he would never give it up. So she had to strike at Vivian and Marcus where it hurt most, their public image. She had to make them nervous. Show them that she knew. She wouldn't hide anymore. She would step into the light. I need to see him, she told Madison that evening. I need to talk to Marcus. Diana, that's dangerous, Madison frowned. What are you planning? I'm not going to fight him. I just want him to know I'm not broken. That I know the truth. Not just about me, but about them. About their rotten family. She chose the time and place. The next day, noon. The main Thornfield bakery on the city's central square. The flagship of their little empire. A place always crowded with people. She didn't want to meet him alone. She wanted witnesses. Not to back her up, but to make sure he couldn't do anything rash. The next day Madison drove her to the square and waited in the car nearby. Diana, leaning on her crutches, slowly crossed toward the glittering windows of Thornfield and Sons. Her cast made every step painful and slow, which only heightened the drama of the moment. Each step was deliberate. She didn't go inside. She stayed outside, by the entrance. She knew Marcus was in a meeting. Sooner or later, he would come out. People in the square noticed her. A woman on crutches, pale but determined, standing at the entrance of the city's most famous bakery. Some recognized her. Marcus Thornfield's wife. The whispers began. Vivian's rumors had already done their work. They looked at her with curiosity and pity, laced with judgment. She waited nearly half an hour. At last, the glass door opened, and Marcus stepped onto the porch. He wasn't alone. 2 of his deputies were with him. When he saw Diana, he froze. His face tightened instantly. He said something quickly to the men, and they shot Diana uneasy glances before hurrying away. Marcus approached her. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, glancing around. "I told you not to cause a scene." "I'm not causing a scene, Marcus." Her voice was calm but edged with steel. "I came to talk." "There's nothing to talk about. I said everything in the note." "You said nothing. You hid behind a scrap of paper like a coward. I want to look you in the eye." People in the square began to stop. A fight at the doors of the city's main bakery, no one wanted to miss that. "Go home, Diana, please." His voice was almost begging. "Don't shame me." "Shame you?" She gave a bitter laugh. "That's not what you're worried about. You're worried about what your mother will say. You still fear her more than your own conscience." Stop it. He raised his voice. You're not yourself. Oh, I'm very much myself. For the first time in years. I know everything now, Marcus. About your family business. About your dirty secrets. About poor Cooper Bell, the man you crushed just to save the reputation of your so-called saintly father. At Bell's name, Marcus went white as a sheet. He grabbed her arm, trying to pull her aside, away from curious ears. Shut up, he growled. You don't know what you're talking about. I do know, she shouted, yanking her arm free. The sharp pain in her leg flared, but she ignored it. Adrenaline drowned it out. I know you sold me out. You sold our life to cover your father's sins. You're not a man, Marcus, you're just a puppet on your mother's strings. She pulls, and you dance. The fight escalated. A small crowd had already gathered around them. People whispered, someone pulled out a phone to record. Exactly what Diana wanted. Publicity. A scandal. And right then, like on cue, a shiny black car pulled up in front of the bakery. The door opened. Out stepped Vivian. Perfect hair, an expensive coat, her face wearing a mask of noble suffering. But she wasn't alone. Beside her, like a dark angel, floated Charlotte Garrison. Their arrival was too perfectly timed to be an accident. They had been watching her. Or someone had tipped them off. My God, what is happening here? Marcus, son, what is she doing to you? Charlotte moved to his other side, creating a living shield. They were staging a performance. A show called Rescuing the Poor Man from His Crazy Ex-Wife. Diana, darling, you need to calm down, Vivian said with fake sympathy. You mustn't upset yourself like this. Come on, we'll take you to a doctor. Don't touch me. Diana cried, stepping back on her crutches. I'm not crazy. They're the ones to blame. But to the crowd, she looked exactly that, hysterical, disheveled, a woman on crutches screaming at a respectable family who only seemed to be trying to help. Vivian was a master manipulator. In seconds, she had flipped the whole scene to her advantage. We understand, Charlotte said softly, gazing at Marcus with adoration. It's just a shock. She only needs time and proper care. Marcus said nothing. Standing between his mother and his future fiancée, he looked utterly lost. Crushed. Vivian signaled the driver, who stepped out of the car. The plan was clear, force Diana into the car and take her away. Silence her. Isolate her. But then Charlotte made her move. The move that would be the final nail in Diana's coffin. She spotted a familiar face in the crowd, Lauren, the local gossip columnist. Lauren was drinking in every word, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Charlotte turned toward her, still holding Marcus's arm sweetly. Her voice rang out loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. We just want what's best for him, she said with a sad smile. He's been through so much. That's why our families are so thrilled about the upcoming event. We're so happy to announce our engagement. The word engagement hit like a gunshot. The crowd gasped. Lauren practically bounced with glee. What a scoop. Diana froze. She had expected many things, but not this. Not here. Not now. To announce their engagement in front of the whole city, in the middle of her fight with her husband, while she stood there on crutches, humiliated and broken. This wasn't just cruel. It was a public execution. They hadn't just taken her husband. They had just handed him over to another woman, officially, in front of everyone. Diana was cast, once and for all, as the abandoned, unhinged ex-wife who couldn't accept her fate. She looked at Marcus. He didn't raise his eyes. He accepted it. He let them announce his engagement while his legal wife stood a few feet away. The humiliation was complete. Absolute. Vivian and Charlotte had won this round. The crowd wasn't looking at them anymore. They were looking at Diana, with pity, with scorn, with a touch of smug delight. She had lost. Spectacularly lost. She turned and walked away without a word, hobbling across the square on her crutches as whispers followed her like stones thrown at her back. But this wasn't the end. This public disgrace only fueled her rage. They thought they had broken her. They were wrong. They had just given her a new reason to fight. She reached Madison's car without remembering how. Her cheeks burned with humiliation, like a slap across the face. She collapsed onto the seat, tossing aside her crutches. Madison, who had seen the whole scene from a distance, said nothing. She just started the car and drove away, taking Diana from her public humiliation. The whole way home, Diana stayed silent, staring out the window at the passing streets. Her head was empty, except for one pounding phrase, "We're so happy to announce our engagement." They hadn't just won. They had danced on her feelings, her dignity, in front of the entire city. Her attempt to expose them had backfired. She had handed them the perfect stage for their triumph. Back home, Diana collapsed onto the couch. "I was such a fool," she whispered. "Such a naive idiot. I thought I could scare them. But they just used me." "You're not a fool," Madison said calmly, setting a teapot on the table. "You're fighting professionals. Vivian has spent years perfecting the art of intrigue and manipulation. She plays chess, and you tried to fight her with fists. That was a mistake. But not a fatal one. What do I do now?" Diana's voice shook with despair. "The whole city thinks I'm a crazy, jealous wreck. Who's going to believe me now?" "You don't need them to believe your words," Madison said, sitting across from her. "You need proof. Solid, undeniable proof. Not just Julian's story or the lab results Vivian can call fake. You need something that can't be denied." "But what? Where do I get that?" Madison fixed her with her sharp, doctor's gaze. "Let's go back to the very beginning. The fall. That substance in your blood. Someone gave it to you. Someone brought you that glass of water. You have to remember who it was." The thought felt hopeless. The night of the anniversary was just a blur of faces, voices, and music. But there was no other choice. Diana had to remember. They sat in the kitchen until late into the night. Madison asked questions like an investigator, and Diana closed her eyes, trying to piece together the events of that evening. Step by step. Detail by detail. Remember the setting. The living room. Where were you standing? By the wall, near the stairs. It was stuffy. Who was nearby? A lot of people. Everyone blurred together. Did you talk to anyone before you started feeling sick? No, I was just standing there. I was tired. And the glass? Where did it come from? I took it from the drinks table. No, not myself. Someone brought it to me. Who? Diana forced her memory. Yes. That's right. I didn't go to the table. I was leaning against the wall, and someone handed me a glass. It was one of the waiters, she said slowly. They were all in the same uniform. White shirt, black vest. There were several of them, Madison said. There must have been something. A detail. She kept replaying that moment in her head. Standing by the wall. A young guy with a tray walking up to her. Glasses of champagne and water. He offered her one. She took the water. Their hands brushed for a second. And she saw it. A tattoo, she shouted so loudly Madison flinched. He had a tattoo on his wrist. That was it. The anchor I can hold on to. I remember. Black. Small. Something like a lizard or a dragon. When he handed me the glass, his sleeve slid up a bit, and I saw it. Perfect, Madison's eyes lit up. That's something. We know what catering company Vivian hired. The name was on their van. Grand Catering. The next few days turned into a detective hunt. Madison, using her connections, got the agency's number. Diana called, pretending to be planning an event. She said she had been at the Thornfield anniversary and loved the service, especially one young man, so quick and attentive. She wanted him for her party too. The administrator on the phone was polite but firm. They didn't give out employee information. Most were students, working part-time. The plan failed. They were desperate. But then Madison had another idea. If they were students, they had to hang out somewhere. Cafes, bars near universities. They just had to look. And so they searched. It was humiliating and exhausting. Diana on crutches with her leg in a cast, Madison after long hospital shifts. One place after another. Cheap student cafes, trendy coffee shops, pizzerias. Each time they ordered coffee and discreetly steadied the waiter's hands. 3 days passed. 3 days of nothing. Diana was ready to give up. It felt like looking for a needle in a haystack. They were sitting in a small basement cafe with dim lights. The air smelled of burnt oil and cheap tobacco. Diana stirred her cold tea, drained. "Maybe that's enough," she said. "This is pointless." And then the waiter came to take an order from the next table. A young man, thin, tired-looking. He set down a tray, and his sleeve slid up. On his wrist was a tattoo. A small black dragon. Diana's heart dropped. It was him. She recognized him instantly. She looked at Madison. She had seen it too. They waited until he stepped away. Madison motioned him over. "Excuse me, could you spare a minute?" He came over, notebook ready. "What would you like to order?" "We'd like to talk to you," Madison said quietly but firmly. "Not here. It's about the Thornfield anniversary." His face changed instantly. Tiredness gave way to fear. His eyes darted around. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know any Thornfields." "You do," Diana said firmly, looking him straight in the eyes. "You work there. You brought me a glass of water. I didn't bring anything. I've never seen you before." He tried to leave, but Madison blocked his way. "Listen, kid," her voice was calm but carried a threat. "We're not the police. We just want to talk. Let's step outside." He hesitated, but he knew he didn't want a scene in the cafe. He nodded and walked to the exit. Outside, it was already dark. They moved into a quiet courtyard. The guy stood there, shoulders hunched, terrified. "What do you want from me?" he asked in a trembling voice. "I didn't do anything." Diana stepped closer, leaning on her crutches. "You gave me that glass of water. And in it was an extract from a herb that causes sudden dizziness, disorientation, loss of balance. Symptoms hit within 2 or 3 minutes and don't last long. But long enough for someone, say, to fall down a staircase." She said it in a calm, almost clinical tone, repeating Madison's words. Her precision and composure scared him more than any threat could. He realized she knew. She knew exactly what had been in that glass. His face turned chalk white. He started trembling. I didn't know," he stammered. She said it was just something calming. "Herbs, so you wouldn't be nervous." "Who is she?" Diana pressed. "I can't say." "You can," Madison said. "Because if you don't, we'll go to the police. And then it'll be a very different conversation. Accessory to intentional harm. That's a serious charge." The boy broke. He told them everything. How the day before the anniversary Vivian had summoned him through the catering manager, how she pulled him aside and offered him a small job for a very large sum. Money he desperately needed to pay for school. She handed him a tiny vial with a clear liquid and told him to add a few drops into Diana's glass of water. She convinced him it was just harmless herbs, something to help a nervous daughter-in-law relax. Diana listened as her worst suspicions were confirmed. It was Vivian. Personally. "Where did she talk to you? Where did she give you the money and the vial?" Diana asked. She needed every detail. In her office, the boy whispered. In the main office of their bakery. On the square. She has her own room on the second floor. He let out a sob. I was such an idiot. I believed her. Will you testify? Madison asked. The boy lifted his head in panic. No. Never. She'll destroy me. She's got connections everywhere. He was right. His word against Vivian's meant nothing. They needed solid evidence. In that office. What was there? Describe it, Diana pushed. Just a normal office. Desk, file cabinets. Old furniture. On the desk there was some weird machine, looked like an old tape recorder or something. Then he stopped. Something clicked in his memory. His eyes went wide. Wait. One of the old workers once told me. Ian, old man Thornfield, was paranoid. He thought partners were cheating him, employees stealing from him. So he had a hidden recording system installed in his office. It was meant to back up verbal deals. Old, clunky thing. Voice activated. It recorded everything on regular cassette tapes. They said Vivian never knew about it, or thought it stopped working years ago. The device just sat there on the desk, like some antique. Diana's heart skipped a beat. A cassette tape. A recording of their conversation. That was it. The undeniable proof. Where's the cassette? Where could it be? She breathed. I don't know, the boy whispered. That worker said the recorder uses one tape, and when it's full, it drops it into a hidden compartment in the desk. There could be a bunch of them in there. I don't know. Please, let me go. He turned and bolted, vanishing into the dark courtyard. Diana and Madison were left alone. Diana looked at Madison. Fire burned in her eyes. She had found what she needed. The key to their destruction. But the key lay in the beast's lair itself. Vivian Thornfield's private office. And Diana would have to steal it herself. She stood in the cold night air, shivering down to the bone, though she couldn't feel it. Inside, she was burning. A cassette tape. A recording. It wasn't just evidence. It was a sentence. And she had to steal it straight from the enemy's heart. But how? She couldn't just break in. Even if she somehow got into the office at night, with her leg in a cast, she was too slow, too clumsy. And according to the waiter, there could be an entire archive of tapes in that desk. Searching for the right one could take hours. She needed access. Legal, or close enough. And she needed someone inside. The choice was obvious. Julian. Back at Madison's apartment, Diana acted at once. The plan forming in her mind was bold and dangerous. It required flawless timing and nerves of steel. I need to meet Julian again, she told Madison. This time the meeting was arranged with even more secrecy. Using a disposable SIM card Madison had bought, Diana sent Julian a short message, asking him to meet her in a nondescript cafe on the far side of town. She knew that after their first meeting, Vivian might have tightened her surveillance on him. Julian came. He looked even more on edge than before. What happened? He asked, not sitting down. Vivian called me in yesterday. Asked if I'd been in touch with you. I denied everything, but the way she looked at me, it was like she already knew. I've got something, Diana said, and in a low voice told him the whole story about the waiter and the recording. When she finished, Julian dropped into a chair. His face went pale. A cassette, he whispered. I remember that machine on Uncle Ian's desk. I always thought it was just junk. If there's actually a recording, it changes everything. I need to get it. And you're the only one who can help me. How? He looked at her in despair. She won't let me near her office. After my uncle's death, she turned it into her fortress. Only she has the key. Then we have to make her leave it. Leave it open. We have to lure her out. And Diana laid out her plan. A counterstrike. They wouldn't wait. They would attack first. They would use Vivian's greatest fear, public exposure. The very next day, a rumor began spreading through town. Julian, using his contacts among clerks and office workers, set it loose through the grapevine. The rumor was worded carefully, anonymously. Supposedly, a disgruntled employee who had recently been wronged was planning to make a big public revelation about a very well-known, respected family in town. He claimed he had proof of shady dealings that would shock everyone. No names. No details. Just a hint. But to Vivian, that hint would sound like a siren. A disgruntled employee. She could only think of one person, the waiter she had paid. She'd be sure he was trying to blackmail her. Her arrogance and belief in her own untouchability worked against her. It never crossed her mind Diana could be behind it. In her eyes, Diana was just a broken, hysterical victim, incapable of such moves. Now it was a waiting game. Waiting for the bait to be taken. 2 days passed. 2 days of tension. Diana and Madison barely left the apartment. Julian called from a payphone every evening with updates. According to him, Vivian was on edge, snapping, irritable, constantly whispering on the phone. On the third day, Julian called again. His voice was shaking with excitement. It worked. She took the bait. Vivian got a call. A man's voice, altered with software, introduced himself as the middleman for that disgruntled employee. He said his client would keep quiet, but only for a price. And a high one. The amount wasn't outrageous, just the kind a petty blackmailer would demand. Vivian agreed immediately. She wanted to shut this down fast. A meeting was set. The next day, 3 in the afternoon. At a country restaurant that was usually empty at that hour. Vivian was to come alone, with cash in an envelope. She'll go, Julian said. She's too afraid of exposure. At 3 she'll be out of the office for at least an hour. Maybe more. That's our chance. Who called her? Diana asked. Me, Julian admitted. I altered my voice. I'll be waiting for her at that restaurant. Julian, that's insane. She'll recognize you. No. I won't meet her face to face. I'll just be the middleman. And the meeting itself, it's a trap. For her. Julian's plan was even bolder than Diana's. He decided to use the situation to strike his own blow. The next day, at exactly 2:30, Diana, dressed in plain clothes, was already inside the building that housed the Thornfield office. She had been helped by Martha, a cleaning lady Diana had known for years, whom she once helped with her son's medical treatment. For a small reward and a promise of silence, Martha led her in through the service entrance and hid her in a storage room on the 2nd floor, right next to Vivian's office. Crouched in the cramped, bleach-scented closet, Diana waited. Her heart pounded so loud it felt like it echoed in the hallway. She peered through a crack in the door. At exactly 2:45, Vivian walked out of her office. She was dressed in a travel suit, carrying an elegant bag that obviously held the envelope of cash. She strode quickly down the corridor and disappeared downstairs. A minute later, Diana heard her car start and pull away. She waited 5 more minutes. Then, leaning on her crutch, she slipped out of hiding. She reached the office door. The handle turned. It was unlocked. Vivian had been so sure she was on her way to deal with a petty blackmailer that she hadn't bothered with precautions. Diana stepped inside. The office looked exactly as described. Heavy oak furniture. Bookcases, a large desk. And on that desk, the machine itself. An old cassette recorder, looking like something from a museum. She rushed to the desk. Time was short. She searched for the hidden compartment. She ran her hands under the desktop, pulled out drawers. Nothing. Panic rose in her chest. What if the waiter had been wrong? What if there was no compartment at all? She scanned the desk again. Then she saw it, a tiny scratch on one carved leg. She pressed it. Something clicked, and a side panel disguised as solid wood shifted slightly. Behind it was a shallow cavity. And inside, cassette tapes. Dozens of them, tied in bundles with rubber bands. An entire archive of the Thornfield family's secrets. She began rifling through them frantically. Many were labeled in her father-in-law's handwriting. Dates. She searched for one from just before the anniversary. There. A cassette marked with a date only a week before that fateful day. The conversation with the waiter had to be on it. She grabbed the tape, shoved it into her pocket, and closed the compartment. She erased every trace. Now she had to get out. Meanwhile, in a deserted country restaurant, the second act of the drama was unfolding. Vivian arrived at exactly 3. She stepped into the empty hall, scanning the room. In the corner, a man sat at a table, his back to her. Alone. She walked confidently up to him. "I brought what you asked for," she said coldly, placing a thick envelope on the table. "Where's your client? I want to be sure he'll keep quiet." The man slowly turned around. It wasn't the waiter. It was Julian. Vivian froze. Shock crossed her face, quickly replaced by fury. "You!" she hissed. "What is this? You're behind this?" "I am," Julian answered calmly. For the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of her. "But this isn't blackmail, Aunt. It's a trap." "A trap? You little brat, you think you can play games with me?" "No. I decided to end yours," he said. At that moment, a side door opened. From what looked like a storage room stepped a middle-aged man with a tired, worn face. Vivian didn't recognize him right away, but then she did. Cooper Bell, the former manager. Julian had tracked him down through old contacts and convinced him to come. "And this," Julian said, pointing at Bell, "is my witness. He just heard you, Vivian, bring money to bribe someone into covering up your crime. You thought you were paying off a waiter to stay quiet about how you poisoned Diana. But what you really did, right in front of a witness, was attempt another crime, bribery." Vivian stood stunned, struck like by lightning. She looked from Julian to Bell. She realized she'd been played. Trapped like a fool. She had walked straight into a net cast by the quiet, overlooked nephew she'd never taken seriously. She had wanted to shut one problem down, but had just created a much bigger one. Diana slipped out of the office building, clutching the precious cassette. She felt both triumphant and like a thief. Adrenaline surged through her, drowning out the pain in her leg. She reached Madison's car, where her friend sat drumming nervously on the steering wheel. "You got it," Madison gasped when she saw her. Diana silently showed her the cassette. "Let's get out of here. Fast." An old cassette tape. In today's world, that was a problem. But Madison knew where to go. They drove to a local flea market, where among piles of junk they found what they needed, an old, dusty cassette player that, miraculously, still worked. Back at the apartment, they pulled the curtains tight as if afraid someone might be listening. With trembling hands, Diana slid the cassette into the player and hit play. A hiss, a click. Then voices. Vivian's voice, commanding and patronizing. And the frightened, fawning voice of the waiter. "It's just Herbs, my boy. Harmless. My daughter-in-law has been so nervous lately. This will help her relax and not ruin my son's celebration. Here, take this. It's enough to cover your semester. And remember, we never met." Every word was poison. Every phrase, proof of her guilt. They listened, hardly breathing. This was it. A weapon of mass destruction. Evidence that couldn't be denied or dismissed as fake. When the tape ended, silence filled the room. "We've got her," Madison whispered. "She's in our hands now." That evening Julian called. He was excited, proud of himself. He told them how Vivian had completely lost her composure when she saw him and Belle. She had shouted, threatened, but Julian stayed calm. He told her they had a witness to her bribery attempt and warned her to be careful. She left slamming the door, not even taking the envelope of cash. "She's furious," Julian said. "And she's scared. She doesn't understand what's happening, who's pulling the strings. She's going to start making mistakes." Now they had everything. The recording of the waiter, a witness to the bribe, and the knowledge of the family's darkest secret. It looked like victory was close. But Diana knew better. Vivian was a wounded animal, and nothing was more dangerous. She wouldn't surrender. She'd fight to the very end, using every resource, every connection. And she'd take revenge. Cruel and merciless. They could go public with everything they had. Hand the recording to the police, leak it to the press. That would destroy Vivian. But it would also destroy Marcus. He was an accomplice. And he was the father of her child. That thought wouldn't leave her. She still couldn't completely erase 10 years of their life together. Somewhere deep inside, a tiny, foolish hope flickered that maybe, just maybe, some part of the man she once loved was still there. That he hadn't been entirely poisoned by his mother. She knew she had to give him one last chance. A chance to choose. A chance to save himself. She decided to use her final, most guarded secret. The one she had carried since that day in the hospital. She called Marcus on his personal cell. He didn't pick up for a long time. Finally, he answered. His voice was tense, hostile. "What do you want now?" "I need to see you," Diana said evenly. "Just you. No mother, no fiancé. I'm not meeting you." "You will," she cut him off. "Unless you want the entire city tomorrow to hear a very interesting conversation between your mother and a waiter." Silence. He knew she wasn't bluffing. "Where?" he muttered. She named a quiet park by the riverfront for the next day. It was open, yet deserted. He came. He looked terrible, thinner, dark circles under his eyes. Like a man being torn apart. They stood by the railing, staring at the dark water below. "What do you want, Diana?" he asked without looking at her. "Money? I don't have money. You know that. I don't want your money, Marcus. I want you to listen. One last time." She told him everything. About the recording. About Julian switching sides. About the trap his mother had fallen into at the restaurant. She laid all the cards on the table, showing how fragile their position had become. He listened with his head down, shoulders slumped. She didn't mean to hurt you," he mumbled. "She just wanted to save the family." "Save the family by crippling me?" Diana let out a bitter laugh. "By destroying my life? That's what you call saving?" He stayed silent. He had no answer. So Diana struck her final blow. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Marcus, there's something else. Something you don't know." She paused. Then said quietly but clearly. "That day, at the anniversary, when I fell, I wasn't alone. I'm pregnant. We're having a child." Marcus flinched as if hit. He whipped around to face her. For the first time in all this time, he looked straight into her eyes. His face was frozen in shock, disbelief. Then something shifted. For a brief moment the icy mask cracked. Something human broke through, confusion, maybe even a flicker of joy. "What?" he whispered. "Pregnant? Is that true?" "It's true," she nodded. "It's still early. But it's real. You're going to be a father." He stared at her, then at her belly hidden under the loose jacket. He seemed shaken to the core. In that moment he wasn't Vivian's son or Charlotte's fiancé. He was just a man who had learned he was going to be a father. I didn't know." He ran a hand through his hair. "My God. A baby." He looked utterly lost, torn between fear of his mother and a newborn instinct to protect. Think, Marcus, Diana said gently. Think of everything. The child. Our future. It's not too late to make it right. You can tell the truth. Confess. We can face her together. For our child. He nodded, still dazed. Yes, I need to think, he muttered. I need to process this. I'll call you. He turned and walked away. Almost ran. Like a man fleeing for his life. Diana watched him go. In her heart, a fragile spark of hope flickered. Maybe it had worked. Maybe the baby was the last drop that would tip the balance. She didn't go home right away. Something told her to stay. A sixth sense. She followed him slowly, keeping her distance. She saw him wander down the riverfront, walking aimlessly. Then he stopped by a phone booth. An old one of the last in the city. He stepped inside, closed the door, pulled a coin from his pocket, began dialing. Diana hid behind a tree. From there she could see his face through the fogged glass. He was talking to someone, voice tense, agitated. She didn't know who, but she could guess. The call lasted barely 2 minutes. Then he hung up and stepped out. His face had changed. The brief humanity she had seen minutes earlier was gone. His expression was once again hard, cold, unyielding. He walked away. Diana stayed hidden, her heart turning to ice. Hope died before it could live. She knew what he had done. She knew who he had called. Not the police. Not a lawyer. The first person he called was his mother. He told her everything. Told her about the baby. And Vivian's reaction was predictable. Diana could almost feel her rage, her cold, ruthless logic. To Vivian, a baby wasn't joy. Not a grandchild. It was a problem. A legal anchor tying Diana forever to their family, to their wealth. A complication that had to be removed. Diana didn't hear the words Vivian spoke to her son. But she knew them. She could have said them herself, word for word. This changes nothing. It only means you have to get rid of her. Once and for all. Before anyone else finds out. She had given him his last chance. And he had made his choice. There would be no more chances. Only war. A war to the end. When Diana returned to Madison's apartment, one look at her face told Madison everything. The tiny spark of hope they had both felt was gone. He called her, Diana said flatly, sinking onto the couch. He made his choice. There was no more doubt, no more sentiment. Marcus wasn't just weak. He was an accomplice. Willingly. He had betrayed not only her, but also his unborn child. The war had moved into its final stage. Now Diana knew she had to act quickly, ruthlessly. She pulled out the cassette. Tomorrow I'm going to the police, she said firmly. And to a lawyer. Enough is enough. But she never got the chance. The next morning, after Madison left for work, the doorbell rang. Thinking her friend had forgotten something, Diana went to the door and asked who it was. Diana, an unfamiliar male voice replied. Nathaniel wants to speak with you. Her heart skipped a beat. Nathaniel. Garrison. I'm not talking to anyone, she said, her hand resting on the lock. He insists, the voice was calm, but there was steel in it. And he asked me to tell you, it will be better for everyone. Especially for you. It was a naked threat. Diana understood she had no choice. These men wouldn't just walk away. She looked at her cast, at the crutches. There was nowhere to run. She opened the door. 2 men stood outside. Big, close-cropped, wearing expensive but tasteless suits. They didn't smile. You'll come with us, one of them said. It wasn't a request. They put her in a black SUV with tinted windows. The car moved smoothly, silently. No one spoke. Diana stared out the window, trying to guess where they were taking her. City streets gave way to industrial zones, warehouses, gray concrete fences. The car stopped at a plain brick office building. No signs. Only security cameras under the roof. They led her inside, down a long hallway, into an office. The office was huge and almost empty. A dark wooden desk. A single heavy leather chair behind it. 2 chairs in front. No paintings, no photos. Nothing personal. Just cold power. Nathaniel Garrison sat behind the desk. Diana had seen him before at city events, at Marcus's anniversary. But there he had been different, smiling, charming, surrounded by people. Here, in his lair, he was something else. Heavy, motionless, his predator's eyes cold and unreadable. He didn't look like a businessman. He looked like a crime boss from an old movie. He gestured toward a chair. "Sit down, Diana." His voice was soft, almost polite, but that only made it scarier. Diana sat, placing her crutches at her side. "I don't understand why I'm here," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You don't?" He smirked slightly. "I think it's obvious. You're making noise. Too much noise. And I don't like noise. It gets in the way of business." He paused, studying her like an entomologist eyeing a rare insect. "I know all about your troubles with the Thornfields. The scene in the square. Your claims. And I want it to stop. This is my personal matter. It has nothing to do with you." "You're wrong," his voice hardened. "It concerns me directly. I have serious business agreements with the Thornfields. My daughter Charlotte is marrying Marcus. And your little circus, your scandals, they put my deal at risk." He leaned forward, placing his large hands on the desk. "I'm a direct man, Diana. So I'll be clear, you need to leave this city. Forget the Thornfields ever existed. Start a new life somewhere far away. Miami, Los Angeles. Anywhere." "And if I refuse?" Diana asked, feeling cold rage stir inside her. Garrison leaned back in his chair. "I don't like being refused. And I know how to be persuasive. People who get in my way, sometimes accidents happen. You, for example, already fell down some stairs. Stairs exist everywhere. And car brakes? They fail sometimes. Life is full of accidents." The threat was blunt and unmistakable. He wasn't joking. This man was capable of anything. And he knew about her fall. Which meant Vivian or Marcus had been keeping him informed. "You think I'm trying to stop the wedding out of jealousy?" Diana asked. "You think I still want Marcus after everything he did? Don't you?" He raised his brow, surprised. "All women are the same. You can't stand being replaced by someone younger, prettier, richer. It wounds your pride. I understand. But it's time to accept it. The game is over. You lost." He saw her the way everyone else did, as the hysterical ex-wife. Not as a real threat. And that was her advantage. "I'm not fighting for Marcus," she said clearly. "I'm fighting for justice. For the people who tried to kill me to answer for it." Garrison grimaced, as if in pain. "Kill you?" Such dramatic words. "Do you really believe that nonsense about poisoning?" "Vivian explained everything to me. You had a nervous breakdown from alcoholism. Very sad story." He stood, signaling the conversation was over. "I'll give you money. Enough for a ticket and to get started. Consider it my farewell gift. My men will help you pack whatever's left in your old apartment. You'll leave quietly, on good terms. And we'll never see each other again. That's my advice." He walked to the window, turning his back to her. Diana knew this was the turning point. Her fate was being decided. She could give in, let fear win. And then her life would be over, spent in hiding, looking over her shoulder. But she wasn't afraid anymore. The baby had changed her. She wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid for him. "No," she said. Garrison slowly turned. His eyes flickered with surprise mixed with irritation. He wasn't used to being defied. "I'm not leaving," Diana repeated, looking him straight in the eye. "And I'm not stopping this fight. And you know what, Nathaniel? You shouldn't be worried about me. You should be worried about your future in-laws. They're not as reliable as you think. They're desperate. And a cornered animal is capable of anything." She didn't know why she was saying this. It was pure instinct. A desperate attempt to find his weak spot. And it seemed she had. Garrison frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Vivian and Marcus might deceive you. They've deceived everyone their entire lives. Are you sure their family nest, their spotless reputation, is really worth tying yourself to them?" She was bluffing. But her words hit the mark. Garrison was a predator, and predators hated nothing more than being tricked. He moved back to his desk, silent for a moment, then his face twisted into a nasty, predatory smile. He understood her game. And decided to play his own. "You know, you're right, girl," he said thoughtfully. "The old witch has been fussing too much lately. Too nervous. I don't like it." He looked at Diana again. But this time his eyes were different. Calculating. He no longer saw a hysterical woman. He saw a piece on the chessboard. A piece he could use. "Fine," he said. "I respect your courage. So I'll give you one card to play. Tell that old hag from me that my patience is running out." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Tell her that if she can't shut down this scandal, if even one more dirty rumor about her family leaks into the press, our deal is off. And then I'll take what's mine." "What's yours?" Diana asked. "Yes, mine," he smirked. "Didn't she tell you?" To guarantee the deal, to prove she was serious, she went to extremes. "She gave me the deed of debt on their family estate. That very house she's so proud of. And believe me, I'll have no problem claiming it." Diana froze. The house. The place where the anniversary had taken place. The symbol of their family, their status. Vivian had put their most precious possession on the line. That meant she was completely desperate. Garrison dropped this information carelessly, as if it meant nothing. But Diana understood, this wasn't just conversation. This was his move in a bigger game. He wasn't trying to help her. He was using her as a messenger to deliver an ultimatum to Vivian. To pressure her, to push her into acting faster and harder. He was pitting them against each other to strengthen his own position. "Now go," he said. "Pass along my words. And remember, my advice to leave town still stands. I'm just giving you a little extra time." The two men in suits appeared at the door again. They silently escorted her out and into the car. On the way back, she didn't give them Madison's address. She named another one. Her old apartment. Garrison's men handed her the key, taken, obviously, from Marcus. They let her take her belongings. Going back felt like visiting a graveyard. The apartment was empty, echoing. Most things were still there, but all the photos were gone, all the little trinkets that made it feel alive. The life itself was gone. She packed only the essentials into a suitcase. Clothes, documents. And as she folded them, she kept thinking. The house. That was the key. Vivian would never have mortgaged it unless she was at the edge. It was her most vulnerable spot. And that's where Diana needed to strike. She returned to Madison's apartment with just one suitcase and a heavy heart. The meeting with Garrison hadn't brought relief. If anything, it made the danger feel sharper. She was caught between hammer and anvil. On one side, Vivian, ready to do anything to destroy her. On the other, Garrison, using her like a pawn in his game, one he could sacrifice at any moment. That evening she told Madison and Julian everything. When she reached the part about the house being mortgaged, Julian whistled. "So that's it," he muttered. "I could never figure out how she convinced Garrison. Now it's clear. She put everything on the line." "But that's insane," Madison said. "That house is their whole history, their pride. Losing it would be social suicide for Vivian." "Exactly," Diana nodded. "She'd never take that risk unless she was certain she could control everything. Unless she was sure the wedding would happen and Garrison would return the deed. She went all in. The thought of the house wouldn't leave her alone. It was the weak link. Vivian's Achilles heel. If she could strike there, the whole structure might collapse. But how? The estate belonged to the Thornfield family. Legally, as Ian's widow and Marcus's mother, Vivian had full rights to it. Or does she? Diana suddenly asked, more to herself than to the others. Are we so sure the house belongs to her? Who else would it belong to? Julian asked, surprised. It passed from Ian's father to Ian, and after his death, everything went to Vivian and Marcus. Standard inheritance. Have you actually seen the documents? Diana pressed. The real property papers? Not the ones in her safe, the ones in the archives? Julian hesitated. No, he admitted. I handled the day-to-day accounting, the company finances. She never let me near inheritance matters. I need to see those documents, Diana said. I need to know who really owns that house. It seemed nearly impossible. The city property archive wasn't a library. Outsiders weren't allowed in. They would need a solid reason to request records that were a century old. But Julian had his own trump card. His meticulousness and years of dealing with paperwork had taught him to find loopholes in any bureaucratic system. And he had contacts. Not high officials, but clerks in dusty offices he had once helped with tax declarations. 2 days later, Julian called. I've arranged it, he said, excited. We have a window. Tomorrow, during her lunch break, my contact at the archive will look the other way while we slip into the records room. We'll have no more than an hour. The next day they met outside the gray, monumental building of the city archive. Diana had to leave her crutches in Madison's car and leaned heavily on Julian's arm to walk. She didn't want to draw any extra attention. They were greeted by an older woman in glasses who, without looking at them, led them through echoing hallways into the inner sanctum, a massive room lined with towering shelves stacked with thousands of dusty cardboard folders. The air smelled of old paper and time. Elm Street, house number 12, the woman whispered, pointing to one of the shelves. Look there. You've got 40 minutes. After that, I'll have to take you out. They were left alone. Julian quickly found the right section. The files were organized chronologically. They started with the oldest. There it was. Handwritten documents in elegant script. The house had been purchased in 1905 by Marcus's great-grandfather, William Thornfield. Everything looked in order. Next came documents from the mid-20th century. A decree of nationalization. Orders assigning communal tenants to the house. The Thornfields had been left with only 2 rooms upstairs. The real interest began in the files from the 1990s. There it was. An application to reclaim illegally seized property, filed by Ian Thornfield, grandson of the original owner. And the city's decision returning the house to the family. See? I told you, Julian said with disappointment. Everything's clean. The house went legally to Ian. Then to Vivian. But Diana wasn't giving up. She felt they were missing something. What's this? She pointed to a thin folder attached to the main case. It was labeled Additional Materials. Notarial documents. They opened it. Inside were a few yellowed pages. A notarized addendum to the restitution claim. A private family agreement. and what they read made them freeze. It wasn't a will in the usual sense. It was a document establishing a private trust. Marcus's grandfather, Aaron, had drafted it in the late 80s, just before his death. He must have sensed what was coming and wanted to protect the family home. The document stated that if the house were returned, it would not pass into the sole ownership of his son Ian. The house was to become the core of a family trust. Ian would be only the trustee, with rights to live in and manage the property, but forbidden to sell it, mortgage it, or leave it to his wife or his son Marcus. That alone was a shock. Vivian and Ian, it turned out, had only ever been nominal owners. But the most important part came next. The document named the ultimate beneficiary, the true heir to the house. Aaron wrote that after his death and Ian's, full ownership should not pass to his official grandson Marcus, but to another person. It was written plainly, all rights to the specified property shall pass to my second, illegitimate child, born of citizen Annette Fleming, or to her direct heirs. Diana and Julian reread the line several times. An illegitimate child. Marcus's grandfather had another child. A secret half-sibling of Ian's. A hidden heir no one in the family had ever mentioned. Everything clicked into place. Vivian knew about this document. Of course she did. And she had hidden it on purpose. After Ian's death, she should have tracked down that heir and handed over the rights to the house. But she hadn't. She had simply kept living there as if she owned it, usurping someone else's property. She wasn't the owner. She was an imposter. She had been living in someone else's house all these years. And now she had mortgaged that house to Garrison. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. This was large-scale fraud. My God, Julian whispered. She's basically a squatter. She's been illegally occupying that house for decades. Diana stared at the name in the document. Annette Fleming. It felt vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place where she'd heard it. She had found what she was looking for. And it was far more than she expected. She had found a bomb that could destroy Vivian not only morally but legally. In their hands was proof of a long, calculated crime. And the key to it all was the name of the secret heir they now had to find. They left the archive, stunned. Julian snapped photos of the key pages on his phone. Risky, but necessary. Now they had not just knowledge, but evidence. Diana's war for her reputation had turned into something much bigger. It was now a fight for justice, for exposing a fraud that had lasted decades. Vivian wasn't just a cruel mother-in-law. She was a criminal, a usurper. We need to find this heir, Diana said once they got into Madison's car. Find Annette Fleming's child. That became their main task. To track down someone who probably had no idea they were the rightful owner of one of the city's most valuable mansions. The search began immediately. Their starting point, the name Annette Fleming and her child's approximate age. Judging from the date of the trust document, he or she would be about 50 now. Julian, with his accountant's thoroughness, took on the paper trail. Diana, with her intuition for people, worked through word of mouth. First they tried to find out about Annette herself. Through old address books and registry office archives, Julian discovered that a woman by that name had indeed lived in their city. She worked at the local Philharmonic. The very singer from the restaurant Julian had once mentioned when talking about Marcus's father's sins. No, she had been Ian's lover. Annette had been Aaron's secret love. 2 stories. 2 generations of Thornfields. Each with skeletons in the closet. Further searching brought sad news. Annette had died 15 years earlier of a serious illness. The documents noted she had left behind 1 child. But the child's name wasn't listed. The next step was hospital archives. They needed a birth record. The hardest part. Medical files required solid grounds for access. Here Madison stepped in. Using her position and connections in the medical field, she managed to get into the maternity hospital logs for the right years. She couldn't remove documents but could review them. After a day of searching, she found it. The record of a girl born to Citizen Fleming. The father's name was left blank, but the date matched perfectly. The girl had been named Madison. The mother's surname. The daughter's name. The coincidence was too strange to believe. Diana tried to push the thought away. It couldn't be. It just couldn't. The final step was finding the heir's current address. Through his registry office contacts and a few carefully placed gifts, Julian got the information. Madison Fleming, daughter of Annette Fleming, was registered at an address Diana knew by heart. She sat in the car across from Madison's house. The very house that had become her refuge. Julian sat beside her in silence. Neither dared to move. The thought circling in both their minds was too impossible to accept. "This can't be," Diana whispered. "It's just a coincidence. There must be plenty of women with that name in the city." "But the date of birth matches, Diana," Julian said quietly. "And the mother's name. And the missing father's entry. It all lines up." She had to be sure. She had to ask. She stepped out of the car. Her legs felt like rubber. She took the elevator up to Madison's floor and rang the doorbell. Every beat of her heart thundered in her ears. Madison opened the door. She was in home clothes, tired after her shift. "Diana? What happened? You look so pale." Diana walked inside. She didn't know how to start. "Madison, tell me, what was your mother's name?" Madison gave her a surprised look. "Annette Fleming." "Why? And your father?" Diana's voice trembled. "Do you know who he was?" Madison's face darkened. It was a painful subject. "I never knew him. Mom didn't like to talk about him. She only said it was a great but tragic love. And that he was married. That's all I know." Diana sat on the couch. She pulled her phone from her bag and showed Madison the photo Julian had taken of the document. She pointed at the line with her mother's name. Madison took the phone. She read, and her face shifted, confusion, then shock, then disbelief. "What? What is this?" she whispered. "This has to be a joke." "It's not a joke, Madison. This came from the city archive." Madison silently stood up. She went to an old dresser she had inherited from her mother. She dug through drawers, pushing aside stacks of old photos and letters. At last she pulled out a small wooden box. She opened it. Inside, on velvet lining, were a few items. An old baptism certificate. And a yellowed photograph. It showed a distinguished middle-aged man holding a young, beautiful woman, her mother. On the back, in elegant handwriting, "To my beloved Annette, as a token of eternal love. Yours, Aaron Thornfield." And in the baptism certificate, under Godfather, the same name was written, Aaron Thornfield. There was no doubt left. Madison sat on the floor, clutching the photo and the certificate. She stared into space. Her best friend, her anchor, Dr. Madison Fleming, had just discovered she was the secret heir of the Thornfield family. And that the house where her friend had nearly been destroyed rightfully belonged to her. The silence in Madison's apartment was deafening. She sat on the floor, turning over her mother's keepsakes, which suddenly took on a shocking new meaning. The photo of an unknown man she had always thought of as just her mother's secret turned out to be her father, Aaron Thornfield. And the estate she knew as the Thornfield legacy was her own inheritance. Diana and Julian sat nearby, not daring to break her silence. They had just overturned the world of the person closest to them. Madison slowly raised her head. Her face was pale, but the shock in her eyes had given way to something else. Cold, steady fury. Not for herself. For her mother. She knew, Madison whispered. "Vivian. She knew about my mother. And about me. And she kept silent all these years." "She didn't just stay silent," Julian said quietly. "She deliberately hid the trust documents. She stole your inheritance." Madison stood. She was no longer just a supportive friend. She was now part of the war. And it was her war too. So this woman. Madison's voice shook with contained rage. This woman not only tried to destroy my best friend. She robbed my mother. She lived in her house, spent her money, while my mom raised me alone and died in poverty. That realization turned her grief into steel determination. No more doubts, no more hesitation. Their alliance, Diana, Madison, and Julian, was now unbreakable. They were bound not just by friendship, but by a shared mission to restore justice and bring Vivian down by the full force of the law. "What do we do next?" Madison asked. Her voice sounded like a commander giving orders. They spread everything they had across the table. Photos of the trust document. The tape recording of Vivian's conversation. Julian's and Belle's testimony about the bribe attempt. It was an impressive arsenal. But Julian stayed silent. He looked at the determined faces of the women and seemed to struggle with himself. For weeks, he had been their eyes and ears inside the company, their secret agent. He had risked everything to help them. But he was still holding back his greatest card. He could see the shift in power. He saw Vivian losing her grip. He saw that the real strength was here, in this small kitchen, on Madison's side, the rightful owner of the family's biggest asset. And he knew it was time to make his final move. "There's more," he said quietly. Diana and Madison looked at him. "There's something else," Julian repeated. He opened his worn briefcase, the one he never let out of his sight, and pulled out a thin folder. "I was waiting for the right moment. I was afraid. But now I think the time has come." He laid the folder on the table. "I've worked as their accountant for years. And for years I've seen strange things. Inconsistencies in reports. Money disappearing into unknown accounts. I always suspected Vivian wasn't clean. That she wasn't just mismanaging the business but deliberately bleeding it dry. But I never had hard proof. She kept everything under tight control, never letting me near her personal accounts or offshore companies." He paused, looked at Diana. "Your war, Diana, all the chaos you caused, it gave me a chance. Vivian was so focused on you, on the scandals, on the deal with Garrison, she slipped. She got careless. She left the keys to her private safe in the office. I knew I'd only get one shot. And I took it." He opened the folder. Inside were copies of bank statements, contracts, payment orders. On top lay a ledger filled with tiny handwriting. "This is her black ledger," Julian said. "I found it at the bottom of the safe. It's all here. Every cent she stole from her own family, from her own company over the past 10 years. She systematically funneled money into shell companies, cashed it out, and hid it in secret foreign accounts. She didn't just bankrupt the business. She looted it on purpose." He pointed at the final number at the bottom of the last page. The sum was astronomical, several times bigger than even the debt Marcus owed Garrison. "That's why they had no money," Diana breathed. "That's why Marcus was so desperate. She robbed her own son. She created the crisis, then offered him only one way out, marriage to Charlotte. She set it all up herself. It was the last missing piece of the puzzle. Now the whole picture was clear. Vivian wasn't just a fraud and a usurper. She was a brilliant and ruthless puppeteer. She had created her son's debt trap just to force him into a marriage of convenience that served her interests. And all the while, she played the role of the family's savior. Now they had everything. A full set of evidence to destroy Vivian Thornfield. Not just in the eyes of society, but in the eyes of the law. Embezzlement on a massive scale, inheritance fraud, conspiracy to cause bodily harm. This was the end. Complete and final. On Madison's kitchen table lay a mountain of evidence. Vivian's black ledger, a folder of bank statements, photos of the trust document, the audio tape. An arsenal strong enough not just to win the war, but to wipe the enemy off the map. The three of them sat together, the air crackling with tension. The question wasn't what to do anymore, it was how. We could just take all of this to the prosecutor, Julian said. It's enough to put her away for a long time. And Marcus too. As her accomplice. At Marcus's name, Diana flinched. Despite everything he had done, the thought of the father of her child ending up in prison cut her deeply. Madison, as always, was the most level-headed. Police and courts take time, she said. Months, maybe years. In that time, Vivian will use her connections and whatever money she still has left to cover it up, bribe people, or flee the country. We can't give her that chance. Then what? Julian asked. We need to stage a public execution, Diana said quietly but firmly. She's not afraid of prison. What she fears most is shame. Losing face, losing her reputation. We have to destroy her in the very world she lived for. In front of the people whose opinion mattered most to her. The perfect stage for that execution was already prepared. By Vivian herself. In 2 days, there would be a grand engagement party for Marcus and Charlotte. Vivian, having recovered from the shock of Julian and Belle's visit, had decided to go on the offensive. With this celebration, she wanted to show the whole city that the Thornfields were fine, stronger, and more united than ever. That the rumors were nothing but jealous gossip. It was meant to be her final victory display. And that was the stage they decided to use for their triumph. The plan was laid out in detail. Like the script of a perfectly directed play. The day before the party, Julian and Madison went to work. They hired several couriers who delivered plain white envelopes with no return address all over the city. The envelopes were addressed to key figures in society, the city's biggest gossips, a couple of independent journalists, a few incorruptible city officials, and, of course, Nathaniel Garrison himself. Inside each envelope wasn't an official invitation, but a simple printed note. The message was short and intriguing. We strongly advise you not to miss tomorrow evening at the Thornfield house. Along with the official engagement, there will be another, far more important family announcement that isn't on the program. You will witness an event that will change the history of one of the city's most respected families. It was bait. They counted on curiosity and the hunger for scandal to do the work. No one would turn down a chance to witness a public downfall. Everything was ready. The trap was set. But that evening, on the eve of the decisive day, Diana couldn't calm down. She paced the apartment restlessly, as much as her caste allowed. She couldn't stop thinking about Marcus. Yes, he was a traitor. Yes, he was a coward. But he was the father of her child. And she felt she had to give him one last chance. Not for herself. For the child not yet born. She knew it was weakness. Madison and Julian would try to talk her out of it. But she couldn't do otherwise. She called him again. This time he picked up immediately. His voice was panicked. What now? What do you want? My mother's furious, she's searching the whole city for you. Calm down, Marcus. I want to meet. One last time. It's in your best interest. She set the meeting at the same place, by the riverfront. It was late, dark, and empty. He arrived 15 minutes later. Alone. What do you want? He asked harshly. If you're going to threaten me again. I'm not going to threaten you, she cut him off. I'll show you. She sat on a bench and pulled her tablet from her bag. She was prepared. On the screen were photos of all the evidence they had. She showed him everything. The trust document proving his mother was an imposter. The pages from the black ledger with the stolen sums. The video testimony of Belle that Julian had recorded. Then she took a small player with headphones from her pocket. Listen to this, she said. She pressed play. The recording of Vivian's conversation with the waiter. Marcus listened, his face growing paler by the second. He yanked the headphones out before it ended. He looked crushed. Now you know everything, Diana said calmly. Not my guesses. Facts. Your mother is a thief, a fraud, and the mastermind behind an attempted murder. The murder of me and your child." He stayed silent, staring at the ground. "Tomorrow, at your engagement, all of this will become public," she continued. "We've prepared everything. Journalists will be there. Officials. Garrison. Your family will be finished. Your mother will go to prison. And you will too. As her accomplice." She stood, leaning on her crutch, and stepped closer to him. "But I'm giving you one last chance, Marcus. Just one. A chance to save yourself." He lifted his eyes to her. They were full of desperation. "Tomorrow, when we arrive, you'll have to stand up. Stand up and tell everyone the truth. All of it. What your mother did. And what you did. If you do that, I'll talk to Madison. She's the rightful heir to the house, and she may show mercy. We'll make sure the main blow falls on your mother. You might get a suspended sentence as someone who confessed and helped the investigation. You won't go to prison." She looked him straight in the eye. "But if you stay silent, if you hide behind her again, I'll do nothing. And you'll go to prison with her. For a long time. Your child will be born while his father sits behind bars. Choose, Marcus. You have until tomorrow night." She turned and walked away, leaving him alone on the dark riverfront. She had done all she could. She had given him a choice. His fate was now in his own hands. The night of the engagement. The Thornfield estate blazed with lights. Luxury cars lined the driveway. Through the wide windows you could see champagne flowing and elegantly dressed guests chatting with glasses in hand. Vivian had created a perfect image of success and prosperity. The last one of her life. Diana, Madison, and Julian sat in a car parked on the next street. They waited for the signal. For the first time in a long while, Diana felt completely calm. She had done everything she could. She had given Marcus a chance. Now all that was left was to finish what they had started. Her leg was still in a cast, but she barely leaned on her crutch anymore. The pain had faded, replaced by cold determination. Finally, Julian's phone buzzed with a short message from their insider, one of the waiters they had bribed. She's starting her speech. It's time. They stepped out of the car and slowly walked toward the house. The house that rightfully belonged to Madison. As they reached the front entrance, Vivian's voice carried through the air, amplified by a microphone. She stood in the center of the living room, tall, triumphant, dressed in an elegant evening gown. Beside her, like porcelain dolls, stood Marcus and Charlotte. "Family is our greatest support," Vivian declared to the guests. "It is the fortress that weathers any storm. Tonight we are not only celebrating our children's engagement. We are celebrating the union of two great families, our strong new alliance, our bright future. I raise this glass to love, to loyalty, and to new beginnings." The guests applauded, raising their glasses. It was the peak of her triumph. And in that very moment, the front doors swung open. Diana stood on the threshold. She wore a simple but austere dark dress. Calm. Confident. Madison and Julian stood just behind her. The chatter instantly died. The music stopped. Every gaze turned toward them. Vivian froze with her glass raised. Her face twisted with rage. Marcus turned pale and looked down. Charlotte and her father, Nathaniel Garrison, watched with cold curiosity. Diana said nothing. She didn't shout or accuse. She walked slowly to the center of the room. In her hand was the old cassette recorder. She set it on a small table and pressed play. At first came static. Then, in the dead silence, Vivian's unmistakable voice filled the room, her plotting with the waiter. "It's just some herbs, my boy. Harmless sedatives." The guests froze. They looked at each other, unable to believe their ears. The recording was clear, the lady of the house, the respected Vivian Thornfield, bribing a man to slip something into her daughter-in-law's drink. When the tape ended, the silence was deafening. Vivian's face was as white as a sheet. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Before she could recover, Julian stepped forward. In his hands was a stack of papers. He handed out copies to the journalists who, sensing a scandal, had already pushed to the front. "Here," he said loudly and firmly, "are copies of pages from Vivian Thornfield's private ledger. They prove that for 10 years she systematically drained money from the family business, driving it to bankruptcy. And this," he lifted another page, "is the testimony of Cooper Bell, the former manager she framed years ago to cover up her husband's embezzlement." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Journalists devoured the documents with greedy eyes. But it wasn't over yet. Madison stepped forward. She stood beside Diana, calm and dignified. "My name is Madison Fleming," she said, her voice steady and assured, the voice of a doctor used to delivering hard truths. "My mother was Annette Fleming. And my father was Aaron Thornfield. According to his will, this house, the very one you are standing in, legally belongs to me. Mrs. Thornfield has not been the rightful owner all these years. She has been an imposter, unlawfully living on someone else's property." The shock in the room reached its peak. It was a knockout blow. Vivian staggered, clutching Marcus's arm. Her world was collapsing before her eyes. And then came another voice. Quiet, trembling, but loud enough for all to hear. It's all true." Everyone turned. It was Marcus. He stepped forward, pulling away from his mother and his fiancée. His face was wet with tears. "Everything they said, it's true," he repeated, staring at the floor. "My mother, she staged Diana's fall. She made me stay silent. She stole our money. I was part of it. I'm guilty." He had made his choice. At the very last moment, he chose not his mother, but what little remained of his conscience. In the chaos that followed, Nathaniel Garrison's voice cut through louder than the rest. He walked over to his daughter, pulled her away from Marcus with disgust, and announced to the entire room, "The engagement is off. I do not deal with thieves and liars. My family will have nothing to do with these people." He turned, grabbed Charlotte's hand, she was glaring at Marcus with open contempt, and headed for the exit, shoving past the guests. It was the final blow. Public humiliation. Complete collapse. Vivian's world, her reputation, her freedom, everything was destroyed in one night. Guests, whispering nervously, hurried to leave the house that had suddenly become a crime scene. Soon, only a few remained. Diana, Madison, Julian. And across from them, a broken Vivian, looking 20 years older, and Marcus, sobbing. Diana looked at them without hatred. Only with cold, hollow pity. She had won. Her name was cleared. Her future was back in her own hands. She turned and walked toward the door in silence. Madison and Julian followed. On the threshold she stopped, not turning back, and said, "Tomorrow our lawyers will contact you." They stepped into the fresh night air. Diana took a deep breath. It was over. She pulled out her phone, found Marcus's number in her contacts. She stared at it for a moment, remembering 10 years of her life. Then, without hesitation, she pressed delete. She lifted her head and looked at the stars. Ahead lay a new life. Hard, but hers. And she was ready for it. And so our story comes to an end. The story of Diana, who went from a happy wife and talented baker to a fighter forced to stand alone against a whole system of lies, betrayal, and cruelty. You know, while reading this story I kept asking myself, where was the point of no return? The moment when things could still have been fixed. Maybe back at the anniversary, if Marcus had just reached for his wife's hand and taken her to the hospital. Or even earlier, when he first let his mother humiliate Diana and stayed silent. What do you think, who's most to blame for this tragedy? The ruthless, domineering Vivian, who valued reputation and money above her own son and unborn grandchild? Or the weak, spineless Marcus, who betrayed his wife, his love, and in the end, himself. Because evil doesn't win on its own. It thrives on the silence and weakness of those who stand by. And the biggest question that haunts me, did Diana do the right thing by giving him that final chance on the riverfront? Did he deserve it after everything he had done? Or was it not for him at all, but for herself, for her conscience, so that one day she could tell her child she had done everything she could for his father? I'd really like to know what you think. What would you have felt in Diana's place? What would you have done? Share your thoughts in the comments. Because every story like this is a chance to look inside ourselves and reflect on what really matters. If this story touched you, if you rooted for Diana and felt joy at her victory, please support us by giving this video a like. Your support is the best reward for our work. And of course, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so you don't miss new, equally gripping and real-life stories. Thank you for staying with us till the very end. Take care of yourselves, cherish those who truly stand by you, and always stay true to yourself. All the best, and see you soon.